In 1968, ABC received hundreds of complaints about one thing on Dark Shadows. It wasn't the vampire. It wasn't the blood. It was that the network allowed it to air at 3:30 in the afternoon, just as kids were getting home from school. By 1970, the show had nearly 9 million daily viewers and had become ABC's biggest daytime hit. Then, in only 8 months, everything fell apart. The network blamed declining ratings, but the real reason involved a movie so violent that parents walked out of theaters and forbade their children from ever watching the show again. It all began with a dream. One night in 1965, producer Dan Curtis woke up from a vivid vision of a young woman stepping off a train at an empty station, lost and alone, heading toward a great house on a hill to work as a governess. He told his wife what he'd seen, and the next morning he pitched that single image to ABC, with no script, no characters, and no detailed plan. To his surprise, the network agreed. They were desperate for a new hit to compete with CBS's As the World Turns, and Curtis's gothic idea, though strange, was worth a gamble. Curtis hired writer Art Wallace, who developed a detailed story Bible called Shadows on the Wall. It outlined the characters, setting, and first 40 episodes, transforming Curtis's dream into something filmable. When Dark Shadows premiered in June 1966, it was meant to be a gothic romance, not a supernatural story. But the ratings were terrible. The show ranked near the bottom of all daytime programs, and reviewers called it dull. ABC threatened to cancel it unless things turned around within 6 months. That pressure led to the moment that changed everything. In April 1967, episode 210 introduced a vampire named Barnabas Collins, played by Jonathan Frid, a classically trained Canadian actor who was reluctant to take the role. He thought playing a vampire would ruin his career, but he needed work and agreed to a short-term contract. The response was instant. Ratings jumped, letters poured in, and teenagers rushed home after school to see him. The character, meant to last just 13 weeks, became the show's centerpiece. Frid didn't play Barnabas as a monster. He portrayed him as a tragic man haunted by guilt and loneliness, and viewers were captivated. By the end of 1967, Dark Shadows had doubled its ratings, becoming ABC's first real daytime success. The network quickly expanded its supernatural elements, witches, ghosts, time travel, even parallel universes. It was unlike anything else on television. Curtis brought in directors skilled at theatrical storytelling and hired composer Robert Cobert, whose eerie score became iconic. Quentin's theme even hit the Billboard charts and earned a Grammy nomination. The sets, designed by Cy Thomas, transformed the studio into a world of dark Victorian halls and shadowy staircases. Despite its low budget, Dark Shadows looked and sounded richer than any other afternoon show. The cast was a mix of veterans and newcomers. Joan Bennett, once a major Hollywood star, played Elizabeth Collins Stoddard, the reclusive matriarch. Though she disliked the grueling schedule and cheap conditions, she brought dignity to the production and earned an Emmy nomination. Alexandra Maltka, only 21, played Victoria Winters, the woman from Curtis's dream. Critics called her performance wooden, and when she became pregnant in 1968, she left the series. Lewis Edmonds portrayed Roger Collins, adding flair and theatrical energy, while young David Hennessy delivered haunting performances as the troubled boy who spoke with ghosts. Nancy Barrett, as Carolyn Stoddard, appeared in every year of the show's 5-year run. The production was chaotic. Episodes were filmed live to tape with almost no editing because tape was too expensive to cut. Mistakes stayed in, microphones dropped into frame, lines were forgotten, props fell, and sometimes crew members wandered across the set. These bloopers became part of the show's strange charm. Fans later adored the imperfections because they made the world of Dark Shadows feel raw and real. By 1968, most of the show's audience was made up of teenagers. The 3:30 p.m. time slot meant kids could rush home to watch vampires, witches, and ghosts before dinner. For many, it was their first brush with horror. Advertisers noticed the massive youth following, and Barnabas Collins became a pop culture phenomenon. Jonathan Frid received over 6,000 fan letters a week, many from teenage girls asking him to bite their necks. His face appeared on lunchboxes, magazines, and Halloween costumes. Not everyone approved. Religious groups accused the show of glamorizing the occult. Preacher Jack Chick even called it Satan's favorite TV show, sparking nationwide protests. Parents' groups petitioned ABC to move it to a later time. But the controversy only fueled curiosity, and the audience grew even larger. By 1969, Dark Shadows reached between 7 and 9 million viewers daily, and even President Nixon's daughter invited Frit to the White House Halloween party in costume as Barnabas. Yet beneath the success, cracks were forming. In 1970, Curtis expanded the show into a feature film, House of Dark Shadows. Unlike the TV version, the movie was graphic and violent, with bloody vampire attacks and on-screen deaths. Parents who took their children expecting the familiar daytime tone were horrified. Some walked out of theaters. Others banned their kids from watching the show. Complaints flooded ABC, and affiliates in several cities dropped the program. The movie shattered the show's family-friendly image. That same year, ratings began to fall. In 1969, Dark Shadows had an 8.4 Nielsen rating and a 27 share. By 1970, it had dropped to 5.3 and 16. Millions of younger viewers vanished, and advertisers withdrew because the audience of teenagers didn't buy the household products that sponsors wanted to sell. ABC decided to replace it with something safer, Password, a simple daytime game show. Dark Shadows aired its final episode on April 2, 1971. Behind the scenes, creator Dan Curtis was exhausted after producing and directing over 1,000 episodes. He wanted to move on to film projects. Jonathan Frid, afraid of being typecast as a vampire, refused to star in another Dark Shadows movie, and without him, the heart of the show was gone. Curtis introduced a new character named Bramwell Collins, but fans never accepted him. The magic had ended. Even in decline, the show's impact was undeniable. Dark Shadows proved that daytime television could be bold and strange, mixing gothic horror with soap opera emotion. Its influence stretched far beyond its run. The idea of a vampire who felt guilt and love shaped future generations of storytelling, from Buffy the Vampire Slayer to True Blood and the Vampire Diaries. It made the supernatural romantic, not monstrous. The music and atmosphere of the show also endured. Quentin's theme climbed to number 13 on the Billboard Hot 100, and the soundtrack album sold thousands of copies, unheard of for a soap opera. The bloopers, once a sign of low-budget chaos, became cult treasures, and fan conventions began as early as the 1970s. Even decades later, fans continued to celebrate the series with reunions and memorabilia. For a show that started as a dream about a lonely woman stepping off a train, Dark Shadows became one of the most unlikely success stories in television history. It began as a quiet gothic romance, turned into a supernatural phenomenon, and ended as a cult legend.